John Patry from Mojo App. Welcome to Irish Startup TV.
Hello, thanks for having me.
Man, I'm really excited to meet you because you have a rich history in app development and you've got a really exciting product that's not just going to be relevant for Mojo journalists. I think this is going to be huge. Would you like to tell us a little bit about the product?
Yeah, of course. So Mojo is a mobile app, iOS for now, that enables people to create very high quality video stories. So by stories, I mean like Instagram or Snapchat vertical short formats, but actually you can use it to produce any kind of very dynamic, fast-paced, short kind of video. But it can be also more kind of a moving poster if you like. And so basically what you do is like you start from a template, which is kind of a full produced story that you wish to start from. So you start from the results, and then you just add your own media, you change text, you add a bunch of elements, and you're done. And you have a you end up with a very high quality story that you can put anywhere you want.
That's really interesting. Now, when you talk about templates, are you going to define the type of template as per the context of the video, or how will you define the templates?
Yeah, well, that's a very interesting question, and I think we're still thinking about that. But the thing is, when we started working on this, you would start actually with kind of a blank Canva, and people would feel a bit like having the writer's block or the producer's block in a way. And so we try to help people into focusing about the results. And for us, actually showing like produced stories was a way for people to kind of reduce that cognitive like pressure and be more like results driven. And so that's why we put templates. And then regarding how we define them and how we kind of categorize them, I feel like right now it's more by discipline, kind of the vibe you're in. But so there is kind of more photography kind of templates, more cinema and filmmaking. Other are more for fashion purposes. And so as you can see, it's a mix between like intention and kind of visual vibe. And so it's not really kind of that's precisely defined, because what we realized is that people often like kind of change the purpose of some templates we design to do other things. So we don't want to kind of narrow down too much the possibilities you can do with the templates.
Fantastic. So it sounds like the approach is to more focus on giving people aesthetic values rather than a particular format.
Yeah, well, we feel like the stories format is kind of already quite constrained per se. So I feel like people don't need more like constraints in terms of formats. We feel like they rather need to be kind of guided, helped for the kind of the visual aesthetics they want to achieve.
Fantastic. And tell us a little bit about yourself and how you came into this particular space.
Yeah, so originally I'm a kind of a math guy, but I spent all my kind of working life, I spent it in the mobile video editing world. So I started working for a video editing app that was called Replay at the time. 3 years ago, it got acquired by GoPro, and it became Quik, which is now GoPro's video editing app. So originally I was actually making the templates for Replay, how different. And then I kind of switched to the more like products and user experience sides, but really focused on the video editing experience itself rather than the whole app experience. So more really on the editing side. And 1 year and a half ago, my co-founder and I, that we met together at the startup and we worked at GoPro together, decided to leave GoPro to work on our own ideas. And I think the starting point was more like we made a good team. We also made a animated text app called Legend together.
Oh, really? Wow.
And so that's the first thing we kind of built, the two of them, just the two of us. And so we felt like we made a good team and we wanted to kind of do it for ourselves. So that's it.
I'm kind of in awe here because I love both of those apps. I didn't realize that you had been involved in Legend as well. And tell me, there's a burning question in the world of mobile journalists at the moment. Where is Legend gone? I still have it, but apparently in some stores it's not available. What's the story?
Yeah, well, there is not much I can say about that, except that it's actually GoPro's app. So it's kind of their call now. It's not kind of my baby anymore. So
you've just broken a lot of hearts.
Yeah, kind of. So no, to be honest, actually, we loved that app, and I think at first there was kind of, and I think you can feel that in Mojo that there is kind of the Legend vibe in terms of text animations.
For sure.
So I think we kept that spirit because we felt like there was something people were interested in regarding that. So we definitely kind of kept that vibe. But yeah, we had to let it go. So I think it's not. Yeah, I think like it's Legend is GoPro acquired it at the same time as Replay, but for them it was more about Replay because it made more sense for GoPro, I guess.
Okay. Well,
yeah.
What I can certainly say is that the most successful apps benefit from the network effect. So I suspect when people hear that you had been involved in that project, but you've now got a new project, it's just going to be a flock of interest in your direction. But how would you see getting the product to market? Where are you at the moment, and what's been the experience so far?
Well, yeah, so we launched the app like 2 months ago. And I think we've made some progress since then. So now we have like kind of a few thousand users like every day coming from different countries,
nice.
From different kind of disciplines, many like mobile journalists, also like influencers, more I'd say on the travel kind of side. They particularly like the app. And I say that also like Mojo is interesting for people that showcase and sell products through Instagram, and they see it as a very interesting way of kind of highlighting their products and their new collections kind of. And so it's very varied in terms of usage, so that's very interesting. And it's very varied in terms of countries. So, but now we're trying to figure out, I'd say, how to make the experience better for everyone, and what's the kind of the core, I'd say, population that is benefiting the most from Mojo. So, I'd say that the most burning question right now is like, is Mojo right for everyone, or should we narrow it down to a more kind of specific usage that would even benefit more from like the app?
Well, speaking specifically to that question, when you say Mojo, do you sort of see it as an app for mobile journalists, or have you set out to create an app for mobile creators?
There is definitely an allusion to the hashtag kind of. So I think it's not the main reason why we picked that name, but it was definitely
hashtag Mojo.
Yeah, it was definitely kind of a reference to that community, which is, I think, is very interesting and very powerful in terms of how they push creation usage to mobile. And I think that it's one of the leading community in terms of mobile creation, I'd say, or at least one of the communities that I'm the most interested in. So there is definitely a reference to that.
Within the sort of mobile journalism community, there's a presupposition that the people involved are being paid and they are using these tools to augment the work that they're already being paid for. So there is, in theory, a revenue market that you can go after. Would this have influenced at all that space, that demographic, or was it more a function of the fact that mobile journalists are a very engaged demographic right now?
Yeah, I feel like it's when we thought that our Mojo as a concept would be interesting for mobile journalists, I feel like it was more about the usage of the product rather than how we could monetize it through them. Because it's true that since it's part of their workflow and their work in general, it would make more sense maybe for those users to be willing to pay. But I feel like that can be said of actually many like kind of groups of users that we have in the product or could have. So I feel like it was more because we felt like mobile journalists are kind of leading, kind of influencers in terms of mobile creation. So that was more the thing that was interesting for us. And also what I can add is that I was used to talking and discussing with a few mobile journalists on Twitter, and they helped kind of refining the product, and they gave a lot of feedback because they're very enthusiastic, and they used to being part of like beta programs and things like that. So it's actually a very good community to start with when we try to iterate on a concept and you're like pre-product launch, I'd say.
That's really fascinating. And on the revenue side, I've previously got experience of working with a product, and we grew it quite exponentially, but there was a freemium model, and it could be difficult sometimes to convert people into a paid model. It's also in the app space in general. We've got this sort of, I suppose, an idea maybe that the App Store is a consumer scenario, but the reality of it is that there's also a business to business model there for the prosumers. Where do you sit into that market, especially, I suppose, just very quickly, the other side of that is that with the apps and the products you previously worked for, if I've understood correctly, GoPro produced those apps to increase engagement with their devices. So it was almost like a loss leader. Where do you sit in that environment?
Yeah, so it's a very good question because it's something which is not completely resolved for us, I'd say, because actually the market is always like shifting a lot. Like as you could have witnessed, the subscription kind of business is booming, and there are more and more apps kind of trying to kind of serve that wave. I'd say the main reason why we tried subscriptions at first is because for us, we felt like it kind of aligns more the incentives between us and our users. Like often developers kind of release apps and they only try to acquire new users to have them pay at the beginning, and then kind of it doesn't matter if they drop and if they don't really like make the recurring experiences of the product interesting. So we didn't want that experience, and we wanted our users to grow with the product. We wanted ourselves to kind of grow with the product. And so we felt like the subscription business was the most like designed for that, I'd say. And it was also the more suited for having a real business. And by having a real business, I mean being able to continue working on the product we love and not being forced to stop because we don't make enough revenue from it. So I say that's kind of why we started with subscriptions. And regarding our position in terms of, let's say, B2C versus B2B, you could argue that App Store is more like app stores in general are more like B2C oriented. That's true, I guess. But I feel like there is a shift and a wave coming in, which is that many actually workflows that used to be on the desktop are kind of switching to mobile. As you can see with very new successful kind of products, like Canva, for instance, that is kind of a competitor to Photoshop and to Adobe in general. The very interesting like photo and video apps made by Lightricks, the makers of Facetune and Videolip and many interesting other products. You can see that those new kind of productivity apps are kind of thriving, and they're thriving through a new set of population, which is not real consumers. It's not like only pros that use it for their work, but kind of the in-between group of people, which is very large actually. People that are very serious about what they do. They take their smartphone as a real tool and not just a toy compared with a laptop. And also, if you look at emerging countries and younger generations, many of them don't actually have a desktop. So, I mean, they do have desktops at work, but not always in their homes. And so actually smartphone from them is their main tool for like, I say amateur or professional hobbies. And so it's a natural place where they look for new tools to create and to produce content.
That's really interesting. So just to go back to the point you've made, just to explain it to anybody who maybe hasn't been in the app business before, historically, if an app did well, it was something that had almost like a straight up onboarding of new users. But the challenge was then to figure out where the revenue model would come from, or else to figure out how to raise investment or to sell it. Now, that can't happen sometimes through either a fear. A friend of mine sold a company to Facebook a few years ago. I suspect Facebook just were sucking up companies at the time, like Instagram, they took on soon after. But I fully agree with you. I think we're in a very different market right now. And what you're interested in doing is building something that's sustainable, that maybe doesn't have the kind of ridiculous growth, but that has steady year-on-year growth. Have I understood that correctly?
Yeah, I mean, we would be okay having an extraordinary growth, to be honest, to be totally transparent. But we're kind of here to stay. So we want to make a product that's gonna be and stay useful over time for people. And so that implies a certain way of running it and of making decisions. And so, and also I feel like those products that have extraordinary growth and that still manage to kind of make a business out of it, and having all of those factors is very rare. And in the apps business,
yeah, they call them unicorns for a reason.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
And so it's definitely somewhere like many people would like to be, but I feel like there are different trajectories to go there. And one of them, or actually the one trajectory we picked, is the one which is make the best product for our users. And not just because we're kind of generous kind of people, it's not that. It's just also that we're more product people, and that's kind of what motivates us, what makes us kind of wake up in the morning making a product we're proud of. And so we feel like if we want to stay in the business in the long run, and if you actually want to achieve those extraordinary goals, you need to be there for a long time. And that's the way we find to stay motivated and to be happy doing that in the process.
I think that's a great attitude. And I think that for people that have previously become incredibly reliant on apps like Legend, it's important to recognize that the reality of it is that although some people may not like paying for apps, if we don't pay for apps, we can't guarantee that they will be there when we need them in X time into the future. So I certainly would be a massive advocate of supporting people that are doing amazing things.
Yeah, and for those people that are not really willing to pay a lot for apps, and because they also people are often used to using many different apps, I think I might have like two different answers to that. One is that we're trying to make with Mojo a very like thorough tool that can enable people to do a big part of their workflow. Maybe we won't be able to encompass every aspect of it, but we will try to be as complete as possible. And also, I think over time, it's also like an important part in our work to try to find business models that enables anyone to pay if they'd like, and not being too expensive for them, and still for us being able to kind of live from that. And so it's kind of a tricky balance, and I think we will find it over time. But I hear those tensions. I mean, it's completely understandable.
I think it's always better to take these things on and to speak to them. And that's why I asked you the question, not to put you under pressure, but just to enable other people to understand from your perspective as a developer. A final question on the product side. You mentioned vertical video. Are you going to have a focus exclusively on vertical or on other screen sizes also?
Yeah, well, it's funny you ask that, because today actually we released landscape format in Mojo.
Awesome.
We already added square format like a few weeks ago. So I'd say our main focus is vertical, because I feel like that's the area where the tools are where people are the most underserved, with like very interesting tools. And this is also an area where like video consumption and creation is booming. So we wanted to tackle that new kind of need and that's kind of growing segments. But we had many users actually asking to use Mojo for different purposes, and we completely understand why they would do that, because if you actually find a tool you're at ease with, yeah, and you try to you're starting to define your own style with it, and you're trying to you manage to kind of produce content you're happy with, why not putting it elsewhere? I mean, it makes sense. So that's why we added those other formats. But yeah, I'd say portrait will be the main focus, but as I said before, we want the tool to be complete, and so that's why we added those aspect ratios also.
Can you give perhaps an example of the biggest challenge and the biggest opportunity that you faced in business so far?
Yeah, so I think one of the challenges we have right now is that our app is appealing to many people, and many people with from very like professional use cases to very like casual usage. And it's kind of tricky to make the app and to evolve an app to be able to please to all of them. And so sometimes we feel like we will end up having to make to take a stance, to make a decision where we want to be. And I would say that's challenging, because on the one hand, it's more like the casual usage, which is driving people awareness, downloads, and people using the app and talking about it. But it's more the professional usage that people are subscribing for, as you can imagine. So there is that tension that is kind of challenging. So that's one of the interesting thing we have to kind of solve. And maybe we will find a spot where we manage to have both, and which is the dreamland that we're wishing we can find. And I think the other thing when considering is that right now we're kind of making an app that is meant mainly for making stories, so like Snapchat and Instagram stories. And we feel like the stories format is kind of more interesting, kind of go beyond those platforms. It's a very interesting storytelling format. Because it's like it takes all your screen on a device. It's very immersive. It's very like short, fast-paced. It's one unit of content, but you can actually add several pages, and you end up with having something that can go actually very deep. So it's a very interesting way of actually taking viewers by the hands and kind of taking them into a more and more kind of complex and depth in what you want to tell, whatever your story is. And so we feel like that format should be everywhere, should be more open, should not be restricted to kind of those even giant platforms. And so that's one limitation we see in being like a tool for stories. But I think there are two hopeful like kind of things regarding that. Is one, that the stories format to me will be everywhere. So that will take time, but it might be. And also that if we're creative enough, we can manage to kind of go beyond what those platforms offer, and maybe people will be willing to use what they create with Mojo as a standalone video or link they will share everywhere, or maybe that's where Mojo is going. That's a possibility.
It's amazing. So there's a potentially huge opportunity there, because the trust in incumbent media, and arguably certainly in incumbent social media, has been seriously rattled in recent times. So as we look towards new opportunities for consuming, it's very exciting to see that there are new opportunities on the production side that will help further democratize production values, which is, it's really exciting.
Yeah, it is. It's definitely exciting. You're right.
What's the best advice you could give anyone watching if they're thinking about setting out in business, or even if it's sport or any other areas where they face challenges, how best to overcome difficult days, because it's a bit of a yo-yo up and down when one is in business?
Well, I think the biggest learning I had recently was about distribution. I'm going to explain that. So
Please.
first, yeah. So first, we thought that making Mojo successful was completely equal to making the best products possible, and to be like the best video creation app, or the best story editor on the app stores. But it's not just about that. It's also about like actually convincing people that that's the reality, and putting actually that product in the hands of people, and making yourself visible to people. And sometimes actually making your product more visible can be contrarian to making the best product possible. And so my advice could be maybe don't focus only on the products, and try to think about your product in every kind of thing you add in your products has to be kind of visible for people that don't know your products, and it has to be clear for them that it is value to them. And to give you an example, we have actually very advanced features in the app. Like you can, let's say, import a logo from any cloud or service you use, or you can
That's
actually add
useful.
a logo or things like that. And but actually, the main challenge for those features is not building them. It's more about discoverability. It's more about making sure that people that needs to do that have their assets, let's say, on their cloud services and want to import them to their device, know that our app is capable of doing that.
That's a really great point, actually. Yeah,
it's a bigger challenge than actually building the feature.
Oh, but you can do that. Really? I didn't know. That's such a great point.
And so that's what I meant by kind of distribution. It's not just about audience or having reach. It's
Education.
Also about it's about that's right. It's about educating people that don't use your product yet how it will benefit them. And I think we recently switched our way of envisioning our products. And now when we try to build new things to the products, we really deeply think about that is that new feature be visible for our users? Will those users that really would benefit from that, will they be able to see that feature is existing? And actually from the App Store, not from using the app or from the onboarding tutorial. I mean, you have to think about that, like even before like people downloading the app, or before like people even at the word of mouth stage, where people kind of because that can be also very powerful. Like you can build feature in your product just for people to speak about your product, even if you know that it will not be a strong usage in your product. So it's a different way of looking at what you build, but actually it's more you feel like you're working less on the product, and it maybe it's ending up with a less interesting product for the users. But actually it's the opposite, because when you only think about things you build that will actually be visible to users, you just increase the amount of value you give them. So I think that's the recent kind of mental shift we had, and I really feel like it will benefit the product.
Awesome. It sounds like a terrific inflection point to have early on in the business. I'm thrilled for you, and thank you for sharing that. That's incredibly insightful and valuable. All I can say is best of luck with the product. Thank you so much for your time, and tell everyone to download the product right now.
Thank you.
So
well, I'm very happy to chat.
Head to the iOS App Store. So John Patry from Mojo App, thank you so much for your time today, and look forward to keeping in touch over the coming months.
Thank you very much. Bye.